Hi, everyone. We're here today to discuss whether women are changing the game in design. And I think all of our guests today would say absolutely yes. I am thrilled to be joined today by three distinguished women. Candice Vanderhorst is a project designer at Digsaw in Philadelphia, where she is also a key member of the Equity Working Group. Candice's interests stem from her extensive involvement in the community through teaching, volunteering, and mentoring through the city of Philadelphia. Her skills are evident on a range of projects, including urban planning, multifamily, residential, and cultural and civic projects. Further, her construction, administration, and documentation experience provides her with a holistic approach that allows her to have an effective role throughout the life of the project. In her free time, Candice enjoys cooking new dishes, taking art classes, and reading books about phenomenology. Welcome, Candice. Next, we're joined by Sarah Wahlgren-Wingbo. Sarah earned a dual Bachelor of Architecture and Bachelor of Interior Architecture from Auburn University. And after graduation, she moved to Washington, D.C., where she served as the 2016-2017 National President of the AIAS. With her background in commercial and hospitality interior architecture, Sarah founded Win Design Company, LLC, in 2020, when at the height of the pandemic, she found a passion for residential interiors through her own renovations. Sarah is licensed in Virginia, Maryland, and DC. Welcome, Sarah. And finally, we're joined by Vershae Hite. Vershae is a licensed architect and associate at Vines Architecture, who received her Bachelor of Architecture from UNC Charlotte and her Master's of Architecture from the University of Westminster. Coupled with her experience at the Freelon Group and Perkins & Will, her portfolio is characterized by historic renovations, libraries, and university work. The deep-rooted meanings in this work are crafted, honest stories, a result of Vershae's sensitivity to diverse social and cultural landscapes, and an investigative design process. Welcome, Vershae. And I am Leslie Carrio. I'm the president of the National Terrazzo and Mosaic Association, your sponsor today. The NTMA has been a AIAS sponsor since 2011, and we are excited to share with all of you our love of terrazzo, and we hope you grow to love it as well. I am the first president, female president, to serve on the NTMA Board of Directors. I was elected in February 2022. I am also the president of DePaoli Mosaic Company in Massachusetts, a 132-year-old contracting business. I am the third generation of my family to helm DePaoli. When I am not busy promoting the use of terrazzo, I enjoy volunteering, traveling with my husband and three teenagers, and snuggling with my dogs. So now that we've met everyone, I think we should dive right in. I think we have some great topics to cover today. Thank you all for agreeing to meet with us to have such an important conversation. The AIAS has a lot of members who are just entering into architecture and design school. So what advice would you give them as they are starting their careers? And would you offer any specific advice to young women entering the architecture profession?
I'd love to kick it off, and I know we all have, I know we're all going to be able to build off of each other's thoughts on this. But probably the first thing that I would say about getting into the profession and starting your career is that, being in architecture school is the very beginning of your career. And you can see that as your first opportunity to start networking and building professional relationships. And especially just seeing your peers in studio as people who ultimately are going to be your professional contacts one day. And that doesn't mean don't have fun with your friends. It means definitely have fun with your friends, because those are going to be your best connections later on. And I think just advice that I would give to my younger self in architecture school is not to get lost in the pursuit of achieving high grades above all else, but mostly focusing on having great relationships and trusted relationships with professors. And of course, it would be hard to get a really bad grade and have a really good relationship with a professor. But I see it as, what is your priority in that? And I'd make sure that it's those professors who are going to remember you and speak highly of you for, decades to come that will ultimately be a great kicking off point to your career. I know, anybody else on that topic?
I agree with you, Sarah. When I was an undergrad, I networked a ton. I joined a committee as a co-chair with AIA Philadelphia. I attended the local and national conferences. They have great discounts, for students. The lectures across the city, even product company open houses, here in Philadelphia with Garden State Tile. I would go there and just meet other architects that were going to look at products, and volunteering and teaching with NTMA. I did one summer. So just really just exposing myself to as many people as possible to build those relationships that you're mentioning. And I would find a way to just express your voice in those rooms when you do finally, step into that.
I'll jump in really quickly and add to this as well. I have the pleasure of a teaching studio at NC State. So seeing some of the enthusiasm that students have as they come in and start their architectural careers is really wonderful. And so I completely agree with all of the advice given so far as networking, and really getting involved with some of the student organizations. We know that studio is hard and it's demanding. The course load is hard and demanding. And of course, there are reasons for that. But certainly it is really, really important for you to kind of start to balance the demands of growing your skill set as a designer with involvement with some of the student organizations like AIAS, like NTMA. Because what that does is it helps build that other skill, not just kind of socially and networking that you can leverage in your career, but it also really helps with time management and being successful and well-rounded in multiple respects as far as becoming an architect goes. So I would highly recommend kind of finding a way, if you're not involved already, finding a way to get involved at some level in those organizations.
Yeah, and Vershae, I might just even especially emphasize what you're saying about getting involved and volunteering and working together as a means for networking and building relationships. Because Candice, as you were mentioning, that it's going to all those events and meeting a bunch of new people that can be really important. But I found that my best relationships and contacts with people have come from volunteering together and working on an event together or planning a project together. And that's what causes a lasting impression of, good skill sets that you have with people. So I think a lot of times when you hear the advice of networking is really important, or you need to start networking, I think we have the idea that I need to go to more events and meet people. And I guess my advice on networking is actually take it as a volunteer with people is the best way to network.
Definitely agree with that. And I think what I was pushing in terms of going out to those events is having those conversations and seeing where you can join on you know, someone's project or a volunteer opportunity, and like observe, but also participate.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's about building relationships and getting the skill set to kind of continue to build relationships, because that's going to, again, carry you really, really far on all aspects of what you end up doing in practice, from how you communicate and work with your project teams, all the way through to how you potentially build relationships with future clients and impact communities. So yeah, at its core, that relationship building is certainly a skill set that it's never too early to begin practicing.
I love what you're saying about volunteering as a way to build your network. You know, the great thing, sometimes, you know, people can feel awkward. And the great thing about a volunteering situation is you have a shared goal, right? You're working towards something, so you automatically have something in common. So that might make it a little bit easier for folks. I'm wondering about mentoring. Candice, I know you are a mentor yourself in the Philadelphia area. You know, do students need a mentor? What is the role of mentorship in an architectural student's career?
Yes, thank you. I think some of the hardest times is like deciding what do you need mentorship on. Like, we don't even know sometimes the questions that we should be asking. We don't know what we don't know. And so when I find myself mentoring students, I really just like to meet them where they're at. And so like when I give advice to students in terms of that is, don't be afraid, you know, to not know. We don't have like, I think sometimes what I find is students are just overwhelmed about like what they want and like what the future holds, and like my interests from freshman year to what my interests are now are completely different. And I think having a mentor be that listening ear as much as like a guidance is really important. And there's a lot of programs like summer internship programs and summer architecture workshops that I think students will be able to participate in to find people that are actually willing. They're there for a reason. They care about education. They care about mentorship. So really getting exposed to those types of programs is really important. And also just participating in them. There's like, you can be as an undergrad, maybe participating in a architecture summer program for 5th graders. And even that type of exposure really helps you be a mentor, but also teaches you what you might need as a mentor. I hope that makes sense.
I totally agree on just the importance of mentorship, and especially that intimidation factor of like, you don't always know like the right questions to ask of like how to get mentored. I think like the very, like one thing that I employ in I'm still in the stage of my life where I'm still seeking out a lot of mentors. And I think that's kind of a lifelong pursuit. Is like, you may, be in the practice of mentoring, but I think it's always a good practice to like still be seeking out mentors, no matter, how much experience you get under your belt. And, kind of my go-to strategy for reaching out to a new person who maybe I've never talked to before, or like I heard them talk one time, but I'd love to get to know them on a personal level, is kind of reach out. And, people do love to be flattered. So I think if you reach out and tell somebody like, I'm really, I love what you've done with your career, and I'd love to hear more about it, or like, I'm just really impressed with the work that you've done. Like, and I mean, of course that's genuine and authentic. But I think getting somebody to start talking about their career and their career path is a great point where, you don't have to come prepared with a list of 20 questions that you want to ask a mentor. You can ask them questions based on what they're telling you about their career so far, or advice that they've had. So it can actually be a lot more open-ended and free-flowing in a discussion. And, a mentor that you're seeking out may provide a lot more answers to unanswered questions, or to unasked questions, I guess, if you just give them the platform to talk to you.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off that. I would agree. Like the mentorship relationship kind of ebbs and flows. Would say, it's not necessarily about finding that one person necessarily that can kind of guide you one way. But I think you'll find that as you move through school and move through your career, that you'll probably have a lot of mentors. You'll seek different advice from different people, kind of based on their expertise and different things, as you kind of work to become well-rounded, or again, to develop and establish your own expertise as you move through the profession. But I would say it's critically important, and also to consider it as a kind of two-way street. So I think, as both Sarah and Candice were sort of alluding to, the idea is that a mentor has to be someone that is so many steps ahead of you, is certainly one approach, and you need that. But you also, I don't know, I mentor a lot of students, but I also like to think that they're also my mentors as things kind of shift and change. There's a really valuable perspective, no matter what phase you are in your academic or professional career, I think that you can bring to the table. So just know that there's value in that, and that there's value in the dialogue. And your mentor can learn just as much from you as you can from them. So yes, I would just say, again, back to the sort of just like general relationship building, don't worry about sort of the pressure that can come with, what's a mentor? I need to come with all these questions and things like that. But really, look for people that you admire, and just get to know them. And as Sarah was saying, people love to kind of talk about themselves, and the more years you get into this profession, the more people will want to share about some of their experiences and things like that. So they're really easy relationships to build once you kind of get locked into them.
I'd also just take it back to, this is we're all on a panel talking about, women in construction. And I think that's also a really big part of growing as a woman in this profession is like strategically having advocates and mentors who will advocate for you when you're either not in the room, maybe somebody who's at your same firm, or even just somebody who would like speak very highly of you or give you the inside scoop on like what to expect in the profession. And of course, like we're all here on this panel trying to do that for everybody. But I think it takes a lot of different experiences from different mentors to hear just like how to navigate this profession in infinite ways. And I think that's especially important for women in this field.
Yeah, I'll add a little bit to that too. I completely agree. And I also would say that, as a woman and as a woman of color, at first my goal was to seek out sort of other women of color as mentors, which is great. I have quite a few of those now, which is wonderful, and they are amazing. But also to kind of open my mind in that a mentor may not be somebody that looks like you necessarily. And again, as you kind of look for people with different expertise and things like that, the idea that I would find advocacy, and because of, we'll say this profession is really hard for women, which it is, but we're working to make it easier. This profession is really hard for people of color, which it is, but we're working on that. But there are certainly people that, again, don't fall into those particular categories that are here and willing and excited to advocate for you. So it's nice that I can kind of sit back at this point in my career and say, I have a wonderful, bank of women of color advocates that are mentors to me, but I also have a wonderful set of relationships with, white men and men of color that have also advocated for me and helped inform who I am as an architect. So anyway, if that's also something you're kind of thinking about as far as you're setting your parameters for how you might seek out mentorship, sometimes you can find it in really unexpected places. So just kind of keep an open mind as you work through, again, your career and your profession, about who you build those relationships with.
I would like to add to that really quick. Sometimes our spaces that we're in might not have, like, how do I put this? You might not be exposed to like mentors that may look like you, as Vershae is saying. So I would push not to be afraid to ask somebody, do they know somebody that is a woman of color in the profession? Like, contact whoever you know to see if they may know somebody. And it's okay to do that.
as I am often the only woman in the room, you know, I love your point, Vershae, because you know, it was very, there were no female terrazzo contractors that I could, you know, learn from, or you know, so I had a wonderful group of you know, male terrazzo contractors, superintendents, you know, people within the company and within the NTMA at large who, you know, took me under their wing and advocated for me when I, you know, even when I was not in the room, to Sarah's point. And I think this is a great entree into our next question, which is, have you experienced a shift toward more inclusive practices in architecture? Are we on the right track? And what might further advance us in the right direction?
I will start. From what I see and I've experienced, I do believe we still have a lot of work to do, but I am hopeful that will become a more inclusive practice. A lot of firms are asking themselves these hard questions about like their strategic plans towards diversity, inclusion, and equity. I just want to encourage like this practice to like sometimes do that hard work, like boots on the ground, and sometimes not what I sometimes see of the fluffy buzzwords in your strategic plans or your missions. I am lucky to be like a member of the equity working group at Digsaw, where I can really assist like the firm to really dig into the systemic issues of inclusion and diversity. The hard part though is that sometimes the instances where marginalized like voices do speak up, they can be shut down sometimes. And I want to say, don't shut your voice down, because every time we speak up, I truly believe like we're pushing towards a path of triumph. So my idea is like to further advance inclusion in practice is to have DEI consultants come into your firms and have C-suites and partners really ask themselves these hard questions, but also kind of tying back to what we were discussing before, younger staff can mentor upwards. And if we're having opportunities where younger staff can voice how they might feel marginalized to upper management, I think we can really push the practice in the right direction.
Yeah, I think what I found, Candice, is, you know, in line with what you're saying, is that like the voice of younger staff seems to be more listened to, and just I think there's more of like an appetite for people almost trying harder now than ever before. And of course, it's like, you know, just the question of like, are we heading in the right direction? It's like, yes, and there's still hard work to do, but I think people are kind of eager to know what that work is. And I think when there are, you know, younger staff members who are kind of pretty dead set on like, this is the right path, it's like, it's very, again, in my experience, it's very highly encouraged that you would take steps to make your office more inclusive, or like bring more empathy to the workplace, or share stories of your peers in the workplace. And even just like in, you know, little experiences that I've had, if I've kind of, you know, experienced something that felt like slightly, you know, like didn't really love the tone of that, you know, it's been kind of easier for me to just say like, didn't really love the tone of that. And people immediately kind of either correcting themselves or wanting to have a conversation. Whereas like, I get the sense that in past years, that would have been an impossible statement to make. Like you would not have been able to speak up for yourself and know that your voice would be heard. And I think that now my general impression, trying not to use my experiences on behalf of all people, but I get the sense that voices are being more heard than before.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Kind of reflecting on, again, practice of 10 years. I've been practicing for 10 years at this point. So whether you consider that a long time or a short time is really up to you. But I have kind of seen a change in the dialogue and what's acceptable in the sort of workplace dialogue, just between when I was kind of starting out as an intern architect, which I don't think we can even call intern architects interns anymore. There's project designers. So even just, in that sort of shift in language of title and kind of giving people, more grounding and more presence and more significance in the workplace, even right from school, I think has changed a lot. So I'm excited to see, that these all of the efforts around diversity and inclusion, not just kind of be on the periphery of the discussion and to do more than just check a box. As Candice was mentioning, come to the table, bring your voice to the table. I would say there was a point where it's just like, you're at the table, we check the box at the table, and you have no voice at the table. So I think certainly now, regardless of, again, what experience you bring and where you are in your career, I think there's certainly way more opportunity that if you said something or you say something and you speak your opinion and your voice, that you'll be heard and you'll be taken seriously. So that to me is really exciting. There is still a lot of work to do. I know at various levels, the way I see it, it's just kind of this wave that's kind of coming as far as like the generation in which all of this is happening and the expectations are shifting. I do kind of notice as you move forward and maybe you start to see people that are further along in their careers, they may still be facing some of those more traditional mindsets just because of who they're exposed to and what's that thought that hasn't quite propelled forward or made it to that point yet. So I find in my career that's the interesting place that I'm balancing, really excited about accepting these new voices and doing what I can as a project manager to kind of create space in a project for them to feel empowered, but then at the same time sort of negotiating with maybe people that have more experience than me that come from a different school of thought and reconciling those two. So that's kind of to me where there's still a lot of work to do just sort of across the spectrum as far as what practice looks like as you move as you step along is really interesting, but I think we're getting there. I think we're getting there. Not as fast as I would like, but we're certainly getting there.
I know. I think maybe, I don't know, maybe something that's encouraging is the fact that it's taking a long time means like it's really resonating with people and we're not making like a quick change. We're making a deep change. Maybe I'll just put an optimistic spin on that. And I think one thing that, Vershae, you brought up the idea of like, our full-time employed people are no longer called interns anymore. They're called designers or associates or whatever each individual firm wants to call people. And I think that generally goes along with a trend of like people in this industry are just being treated with more respect and dignity. And that's just from a general, like, I think like the profession needs more architects. And so like, we can't constantly have a hazing culture of like, we're trying to make this the worst working conditions possible and expect that like the best of the best are going to fight it out to stay here. It's like there's, just the culture of architecture in general is like, if it's terrible, you can leave. So like it kind of needs to be better than that. And I think I'll say it again, like getting rid of hazing culture in architecture and making it a more supportive, growth-minded culture for the most part.
Do you find that that this desire to be more intentional about inclusion is expressing itself in your work?
I would say absolutely. It's expressing itself, not just in who we're bringing around the table as far as our project teams go, but it's expressing itself in what our clients' demands and expectations are too. I'm really excited that, and even again, the sort of generational shifting that happens, when you're coming to the table and meeting the client team, and this may be, I don't know, part of me getting older and, whatever, but noticing that there are starting to be more people that are part of that client team that, are younger or, kind of look like you. It's a more diverse group with a more forward thinking kind of vision. about what the future of the projects should be. I feel like the mindset and what clients are bringing to the table now is very, very aware. Less in ways where we have to say, oh, by the way, we're practicing architecture and we're doing this sustainability thing over here. Have you heard about it? But now they're coming to the table with the expectation of, can we push toward a, carbon net zero building, or can we exceed LEED, and can we go into WELL, and what does that type of environment mean for, our future staff and people that are part of our institution. And so it's really wonderful to see, I think at the same time that architecture is seeking to kind of catch up and make changes on that front, that it's also happening pretty quickly from the client side as well. And we certainly have to meet those expectations. Otherwise, there's going to be a gap there. And I know there's a broader conversation even about the value of architects, right? You can talk to certain people. Will we need architects in the future? Of course, I would say yes, absolutely. But it's those places where we can get in, where we can become facilitators and advocates and people that do community engagement and are well-versed in sustainability and those things that really prove our value, more than just kind of an ability to, do a really beautiful sort of sketch. Not that that's not good, but do a beautiful sort of sketch, and that's why you should hire us. So anyway, yes, I think so.
Again, I'll reiterate what you're saying in that, yeah, I think one of the ways that a move towards inclusion is just really being amplified in work is that, clients want it, and clients are also pushing for it in their own companies, or even individual households. If you're working in residential, like people are seeing it in their kids' schools. Like, it's not just within the architecture industry. Like, this is a worldwide push. So or especially, I guess I'll say national, it's a national push. And so, we're seeing it, we're just seeing it everywhere. And architecture can't be the one industry that's falling behind, because that's when we will kind of brand ourselves as irrelevant and as not keeping up with the times. And so I guess I'll just say that, as much as, in the past, it would be really hard to be a woman in architecture. And especially I started my own firm 7 months ago. So it was kind of is it going to be really hard for me to be a woman who kind of gives herself the title of owner and principal? And I have not found a client yet that is you're too young or you're too much of a woman to be doing this. There's generally a sense of yeah, if you say you can do it, you can do it. So let's see it. And then the results, speak for themselves. So I guess I'd say the idea of stereotypes or what people are putting on others in terms of their capabilities seems to be lessened, I guess, in my experience. If you can do it, then we don't really care about the prejudice that we might hold towards you.
I agree. And I would just add really quickly, even just, again, we've talked about the team makeup and the client aspect of it, but I would also say in the projects themselves, there's this awareness and expectation of representing community and culture in a way where maybe it hasn't been represented in the past. My firm does a lot of public work, and we have a lot of complex cultural projects that, that seek to right or wrong, or tell the truth of a history and embody that in the architecture in some way. And we see clients really wanting to take some of these things head on, take on some of these issues head on, and figure out how does that translate into a building, and not just a museum, but how does it translate into our research building? How does it translate into our community library? How does it translate into our event center? And those are all real examples of projects that I've worked on where we've had this, we need an event center, but it needs to do this other work of representing history and community and culture. And so how do we do that and still have it be an active and lived space and experience? And so I think it's wonderful to see. It makes the projects certainly more challenging, but I think for me personally, it gets to the root of why I wanted to become an architect in the first place, which was, to serve community and to serve people. And so to start to be able to talk about that in a really obvious way, even outside of the academic environment, is inspiring. And I think lots of projects are headed in that direction.
I'm going to quickly add, I think we can see that our projects are very diverse. And so how do we expect our buildings, to serve such a diverse community and typologies when the people designing them more often than not may not look like them or come from the same background or have the same identity. And so I'm excited that, we are becoming more inclusive for that reason, to serve the diverse backgrounds that our buildings will provide.
That's a great point. I'm wondering, Sarah touched on this a few minutes ago, if you could specifically share a little bit about your experience as a woman in architecture. What pinch points have you experienced, perhaps, or a time when you've had to advocate for yourself?
Sure, happy to jump off there. I think I had heard a lot coming into the profession, like especially leaving school and just starting out as an emerging professional in the workforce, that like nobody's ever going to take you seriously as an architect. Like do as much as possible to get licensed as soon as possible, like build your credibility in any way possible. And I certainly that was a real fear I had, was like I have to build my credibility like better, faster, stronger, just so strongly. And I guess I would say I think I held a greater fear than what actually happened. I did get licensed, and I think oftentimes when I ever felt a sense of, I guess, who I feel it from, and maybe Leslie, you would even have some shared experience on this, or a different experience, is I feel it from the contracting side, from the contractor side, more than I feel it from the architectural side. And so oftentimes on site, there will be questions about my credibility, or were you actually the architect on this? And it's just always been a nice moment to say I am an architect. I'm a licensed architect. I did do this detail and I have the answer for you, and see my stamp is on this drawing. And so I think that I guess I would say being licensed, I almost don't even say this as advice, because I don't think you should fall back on a license to stand up for you, rather than you yourself having inherent value in the profession. But I have found it to be my experience that having a license has stood in for my credibility when being a woman architect has been challenged. Would love to hear if anybody else has a shared or different experience with that.
I certainly have had plenty of experiences where my experience is not presumed, and certainly you open your mouth and talk for a few minutes, and hopefully, those concerns go right out the window, right? Because yes, absolutely, you are, what you're there, what you're talking about, and it becomes obvious pretty quick. But yes, I certainly hear you.
Yeah, I would say I agree. I certainly have had the experience of going out on one of my job sites and taking an intern with me who happened to be male, and then the contractor actually asking him the questions instead of me the questions, and him being well, I don't know, she's the architect, she's my boss, you need to ask her those questions. So it's just it's an interesting thing, kind of being on site and people just making those sort of ad hoc assumptions about what you can and can't do. But I have found very similarly, the license for me has, when I mentioned, and I start with, I'm a licensed architect, that does do some of the work to kind of, break that assumption potentially about what your role is on a project. But I find that it's, and I know this question isn't necessarily about advocacy, but kind of working with and working with a team that is willing to kind of advocate for you. I know we talked about it through mentorship, but I think it's important that they're aware to make them aware of some of the things that you might face on that end so that they can advocate for you in that way as well. As I mentioned, I've been practicing for 10 years now, but I did even last year, I think we had a project that was starting construction, and I pulled the PA aside that I've been working with on the project, and I said, look, this is my experience when I go into this phase of a project. You're going to have the contractor. I know I've been doing the heavy lifting on this, but they're going to look at you and they're going to ask you all the questions, and they're going to assume that I'm here to take notes for you. And so, and as much as you can, I come to the table and I'll run whatever I can. But when that happens, I want you to just be aware and kind of, if we need to strategically set it up so that you put questions to me so that we can just set that tone intentionally in this first series of meetings until it clicks and until they get it. Let's work together to do that. And that was a conversation I had to have with my colleague that I think, I could have not had the conversation, and it could have just fallen however it goes, and I would have been on site and had this maybe elongated struggle with being taken seriously by the GC on the site. But just knowing that part of that navigating as you work as a woman and as a person of color in the profession, you will have to have some of those conversations and then make some of those efforts just to make people aware of what your lived experience is with this, and propose your solution and let them know how they can be an active participant in making that experience better. So yeah, I feel like I went on a tangent with that one, and I can't remember the base question anymore.
I think it's a great example of how to advocate for yourself in a very practical, way. So that was great. Candice,
so I am not licensed. I am still questioning if I want to get licensed 6 years in now. And most of my experience, probably 90% of it, is during CA. Fortunately, I haven't had the experience where being a woman on site has affected me. I think it's because I am fortunate, and this is kind of where I'm going to pull in my advocacy for myself. I'm fortunate that anytime my PM would join me on site as a white male, he always shifted it to me. And I think that I appreciate when my PM can acknowledge that I am the person that is acting as a PA role, and he didn't just take it on for himself like some may do. So I'm blessed in that sense. And I think I was able to have that relationship with my PM because the pinch points that I was having at other firms was that I wasn't growing, because the way that some of the firms that I experienced was that the feedback loop was semi-annual or annual performance reviews. And I wouldn't find out that maybe my performance was lacking until 6 months or to a year after I did a task a while ago. And so when I came to my new firm, I made it my duty to really sit down my PM, check in with after milestones or after a task, to really build a trust and relationship with him that I really did care, and I knew what I was talking about. And so that lesson, I think for me, would be to take away that you can learn and how to frame your questions to lead your professors or project managers to mentor you and build that trust and that relationship. So you might not have to face some of the experiences as being a woman in this profession. I hope that makes sense. Yeah.
absolutely. Again, the message: be proactive, right? And advocate for yourself. I have a question. Maybe one of you could address. I hear that you can't be an architect if you have kids. Is that true?
Absolutely not. You can absolutely be an architect and have kids. I am a mother of one and expecting my second. So my son is 4 years old, and I'm expecting my daughter in 2 months, actually. And so I would say I had about 5 years of practice under my belt before my first child, and have been practicing as a mom for 4 years about up till today. Um, and I had, of course, concerns about, well, if I have a child, like, how am I gonna be able to, be available for a project when I need to be, or travel when I need to. I've heard sometimes that you don't get staffed on certain projects when you're a parent or when you're a mom because of all of the assumptions about the lack of focus and the other things you had going on. And I am really fortunate, I would say, to work at a firm where that's not the case. Most everybody on staff actually has kids, from our owner all the way through. There's one person, our design director, he's got triplets plus one, so he's got his hands full. But I think, being a mom actually has made me a better architect in a number of ways. I think that it's just allowed me to kind of see the forest through the trees in some respects. So getting a sense of what's really important and what's really needs to be handled today versus tomorrow, and setting priorities as you need to. But also just kind of it enables you to do a lot of just filtering again and set those priorities and see what's important. But it's also, I found that I'm a lot more efficient. If you talk to any parent, they're like, what did I do with my time before I had a kid? Like, I had weekends or something. I don't understand. But I've just found that even as far as the pace with which I work, it's a lot more quick than it was before. And the years of experience, and you do something a certain number of times, you get faster and you get better at it. But I've certainly found that, knowing that I've got daycare pickup, today, it's just kind of like, okay, here's my task list. I want to get through that. Like, let me make sure I hit everything. I talk to everybody I need to talk to. And there's just a lot less of that sort of like that down, that sort of time in between where maybe I would have taken a little bit longer, a few extra minutes to reread that email for the fourth time, maybe just read it through twice and then it goes out the door kind of thing. But I absolutely enjoy it. I really enjoy seeing other women as mothers successfully practice. I know we talked about mentorship before. One of my huge mentors, Terry Canada, who practices here, she has been a mom ever since I've known her, and I was an intern architect or project designer, if we changed the language for back in the day, a mom and a wife, and just, was managing and running some amazing high profile projects in our office. And she was just, always championing and saying, I can. And not just that, but she would talk to me about how her career actually took off after she had her daughter, and she experienced success beyond what she could have even imagined. And that her drive not just became to kind of be a better architect for herself and for the profession, but also just to kind of trailblaze for her future. What if her daughter wants to be an architect, and what can she do to kind of make those strides to make that better? So just some of that, that shift that comes with that parental mentality, I think, again, just makes you, I don't know, I think mom architects or women architects, or parent architects, I should say, because my husband is great about helping carry the load as we balance with both kids, is a wonderful. I think we both love it, the balance and the juggle. And I say that my son is my greatest, longest lasting project of all the ones I've worked on. So yeah.
I love that. We only have a few minutes left. So I guess I would like to frame our last question as kind of a wrap up, and we'll give each of you an opportunity to respond. I would love to hear in closing from each of you about what are you excited about in the future of architecture? Or perhaps what can current students look forward to as they enter the profession? or if you prefer, if you have any parting words of advice, I know they would love to hear those as well. There's someone willing to start us off?
I can kick us off. Least amount of pressure after both of you have wise words to share. I don't want to follow it. But I think one thing that, used to kind of stress me out is it felt like there wasn't a prescribed path in architecture anymore of like how to be successful, of like, if I do these, 10 things sequentially, like I'm going to be CEO of like that big firm over there. There's no prescribed path. And I think like really taking that on as like a huge opportunity for the architecture profession and saying like, there are so many ways to first define success in this profession, and then second of all, achieve it. I just think like there is so much room out there for you to choose your interests, change your interests, advocate for yourself, find mentors, grow, keep changing your interests again, and like just pursue a path that works for you at any given moment. And so I guess what I look forward to in this profession is just an ever expanding idea of what the profession is. Thanks. And it's been a fun panel. Thank you.
I agree with that. Like, I think I mentioned earlier that my freshman year of college, I had this plan and where I thought it was going to go and what my interests were and what role I wanted to be at an architecture firm. And then as time went by, it shifted, not in a bad way, but just expanded more. I wasn't looking through one lens. Opportunities came and I just went with the flow. And I think the little piece of advice or statement that's helped me as things shift and you learn new things is that how can I be comfortable and uncomfortable at the same time? Sometimes that comfortable part gets through those hard parts, and then that uncomfortable part keeps you excited to have that curiosity keep going to see where it'll take you in your career. So I think that's my parting.
Yeah, I think along similar lines, I am excited about the broadening that's happening in the profession and how, I think like Sarah was saying, you can really, you can start to define what it means to be an architect. You don't necessarily have to check certain boxes, and that is what an architect is. And I think it's inspiring to see architects as researchers and architects as advocates, and architects as, even in thinking about like Harvey Gantt and, running for mayor of Charlotte and things like that, like just there's so many things that an architect can be. And I feel like with the conversations going on in the architecture community and the increased awareness, there's now a lot of internal and hopefully external support of just like the broadening of that term. So I think students can really look forward to that. Sometimes I think I would love to have entered into the profession at this moment instead of just kind of right before this moment, but everything happens for a reason. But I just think it's headed to a wonderful, again, wonderful, diverse and broader place where, the lofty goals, the goals which seemed lofty at one point of, architects really being able to make change and impact communities. Like, I think you're seeing those things actually start to be real because of the way people are redefining the way that they practice and the way that they want to pursue architecture. So there's a lot to look forward to. And I always say I am excited to work with all of you. So stick with it as far as architecture school and finding your interest and all of that, because we're sitting here practicing and excited to read your future research papers and, see your future work featured somewhere and hear you speak at a conference and, just really poised and ready for the influx of information and excitement and enthusiasm you're going to bring to the industry.
Vershae, what an awesome closing. that I love that we were able to share such a hopeful message with everyone today. You know, it's such an optimistic time. You know, as we are, you know, broadening what it means to be an architect and what it means to be a success in the architectural profession. You know, I think I can see from the three of you, you know, how excited you are, you know, about some of the developments you're seeing in your profession. So I think that I thank you all, Sarah, Candice, and Vershae, for talking with us today. I think that I hope that the AIAS viewers today, you know, take away that same feeling of optimism. And I would just say, you know, don't forget to be proactive about advocating for yourself. You know, they're ready to listen when, you know, when you use your voice, and network, you know, talk to your professors, talk to your peers, find ways to volunteer if you're nervous about, you know, approaching people, you know, and you know, work off your shared values in the volunteer experience. So again, thank you all for joining us. And thank you on behalf of the National Terrazzo Mosaic Association for spending time with us today. If anyone would like more information about terrazzo, we are at ntma.com. Thank you.